So your research fellow post started 98, ran
Yeah.
for...
It was 3 years initially. It was a 3-year post initially, and then for it was extended on a couple of occasions. I can't remember how many occasions, and I can't remember for how long, maybe for a year at a time or 18 months at a time. And again, I can't remember exactly when, but at some point I was very lucky to get a lecturer's post then.
Okay.
A lecturer's post. Yeah.
So at what point was it then, if there was a particular point, did you think, I'm going to start collecting material to form an archive, or how did that come about? I mean, what was the process that led you to that?
I'd say that started very early on. As I said, I didn't really know what was expected of me, didn't really know what to do, apart from the fact that I was expected to set up research projects in ceramics. And I suppose I noticed that around me there was quite a lot of stuff that people had kept over a number of years. I think my co-host in particular had recognised the value of keeping a lot of material related to ceramics, and so there was quite a lot of that around the department. And at the time, if we're thinking back to this time, if we're thinking back to the late 1990s, well, firstly, there was very, very little research going on in ceramics anyway. But the other thing was there was very, very little published about ceramics. If you went into the library, for example, you go to the shelves for painting and sculpture, and there were just loads and loads of books. You go to the shelves for the ceramics, and there weren't any books. It was as obvious as that. And what books there were tended to fall into two categories. So there were the how-to-do-it books. So lots of books on glazes, lots of books on techniques. And then the other category of books were the monographs on important potters, such as Bernard Leach. But there really wasn't much else, and so that seemed to me to be significant. That there was that big gap on the library shelves. That started to be filled quite quickly, I think, in the late 90s, early 2000s. Garth Clark's book, The Art of the Potter. Oliver Watson's book was already out at that time, wasn't he? Oliver Watson's book had just come out.
Yeah, I think it came out throughout my BA. Yeah.
In the 1990s.
Something with critical analysis.
That's right.
Of
ceramics.
Craft,
Oliver Watson, in case you don't know, Oliver Watson at the time was head of the Department of Ceramics and Glass at the Victoria and Albert Museum. So that big book, it served as a catalogue, didn't it? It was a catalogue of the ceramics that were in the Victoria and Albert Museum, but there was also a critical element to his writing as well, which was, as you say, very fresh, and sort of gave you the idea that we needed more of that kind of writing. And then not long after that, Tanya Harrod's big book on the crafts in Britain in the 20th century, that came out. So that there was then a growing amount of books published, but still ceramics research took a little while to get going, I would say. And I thought that if research in ceramics was to get going, people needed material to work with. So there weren't that many books. So that meant that any other kinds of material took on an added importance. The other kinds of stuff that was about took on an added importance.
When we talk about the other kinds of stuff, so the material that we'd find within the collection here, it is different to the sort of information you'll find within a monograph or a textbook on the shelf or a journal article.
That's right.
In the journals. I mean, I mean, that's what I think, that this is the real value, that we have a third sort of format of information
Yeah.
within the ceramics archive here. Would you like to sort of talk about a little bit
Yes.
about how that different information
Yes.
can be valued and used?
Well, one of the really important things to say about it at the start is a lot of this is the kind of material that is very easily thrown away. If you get a book that's published, that tends to be valued. So libraries buy books, they put them on shelves, you know, they enter into the literature, and so people know that they're there. The books go on to databases or lists or biographies or whatever it is, so, you know, so people can track them down. A lot of this material is quite different in that, first of all, you know, if we just look at some examples, just pick this box up, it's the kind of thing that is so easily thrown away, you know? So things like press releases, things like artist statements, even some exhibition catalogues which aren't expensively produced, they tend not to be kept. And I felt that there was a lot of very, very valuable information in these kinds of documents. And it was this kind of information that people could use. People could use, you know, for the benefit of their research.
Yeah, so current students would be able to use it.
Yeah.
The idea was that it would enhance the information that they would get from either the journals or the books on the shelves.
That's exactly right.
And it would inform both their practice and their theory.
It would indeed. So to give you an example, well, first of all, perhaps I should say that as I started to put this information together, I had no clue about archiving. This isn't a professional archive in the sense that I had no training as an archivist. I didn't know what I was doing, nor did I know the best way to organise it. So I just organised it in a way that I thought made sense to me, you know?
Well, you were the person that was using it mostly.
Exactly.
So that kind of,
Yeah.
was understandable.
So one of the things was I just collected and put in boxes things relating to particular artists. You know, that was one easy and straightforward way of organising it. So that's what I did. Another way of organising it was to put exhibition catalogues all together, to, you know, to group things by category. And both things seem to work. So if you, so here are a couple of examples, for example, that I just taken off the shelves. So this is Cecile Johnson Solis. You will know her,
Yes,
Paul.
yeah.
I don't know about any of you, whether you know Cecile's work. A Cardiff-based artist, a Cardiff-based sculptor. She identifies as a sculptor, but for many years she used clay and made pots, and the pots were her sculpture. So I was very fortunate at the time as well. Cecile was also a fine art research fellow, I think, at the same time as Morgan and I were ceramics research fellows. So it was wonderful to have Cecile around. And of course, you know, she was able to give us some information which we were able to put together. So things like an extended CV, things like this from the Gilmore Gallery in London. So I don't quite know what that is, if it's a press release or if it's something that they put up on the wall as to tell people what Cecile's work was like. Here's a press release from the National Museum in Cardiff.
So it is a lot of the material that it's sort of of its time, isn't it? It's of a specific time. It relates to probably a specific exhibition
Yes.
by the maker, so it'll give a very particular view or piece of writing about that maker at that time.
It will, and I think the important thing is that it all goes together to build a fuller picture, rather than just having the one book on or the two books on the shelves which everybody reads. You know, if you are interested in going a little bit further, this information will really fill out your knowledge and your understanding in a way that nothing else can.
Yeah, there's some remarkable pieces of writing in here which may be very short.
Yes.
In comparison to an artist monograph or a journal article.
Yeah.
But as Jeff said, it pads out the whole picture.
Yes.
It gives you a fuller idea of this maker or the style of work at this time.
Yes. One of the other things that we did, of course, was to create material for the archive,
Such as?
audio and video recordings. So as well as actually collecting all these things together, it was also a more active process of actually making archival material. Now again, I didn't know how to do that. You know, I didn't have any training in interviewing people, but it seemed like an important thing to do. And I think that idea of recording was very current at the time, in the late 1990s, early 2000s, especially in Aberystwyth. Moira Vincentelli, curator of the Ceramics Archive in Aberystwyth, she was creating a lot of recordings. And in Bristol, Mike Hughes set up an organisation there. Originally it was called something like, what was it, the National Centre for the Electronic and Video Archive of the Crafts, or something like that. It became Recording the Crafts. And so Mike's idea that it was
So I do actually manage an exhibition for my right hand, managing 12 people.
We're just talking about recording the crafts, and literally recording the crafts.
yeah.
So part of the ceramic archive here has audio-visual material. So Jeff's just talking about how that came about and how it was within context of other recordings around the country.
It was. I think, you know, oral history, as it's generally called, really took off, I think, at that time, in the 1990s. And I think it's part of a more widespread movement, which actually we talked about as a group last week. You know, when we were talking about the importance of other people's stories, you know. So oral history was very much about that. It was about recording the experiences and the history of a very, very wide range of people. You know, not just the famous people, but a wide range of people. So it was important to capture people's stories. And of course it was and still is especially important to capture people's stories while they're still with us. You know, once people have died, you can't capture their stories anymore. You only do it when they're alive. So Mike Hughes in particular, in Bristol, saw it as an imperative to record some of the older potters, some of the older ceramicists, before it was too late. And he did that. So he made a number of recordings, and the recordings were put onto CDs, and they sold the CDs, and I was very pleasantly, I don't know if I was surprised, but I was certainly grateful when the library in Howard Gardens actually bought the collection of CDs from Bristol. So they're all here.
Yeah.
So they're now in this archive. You know, it seems quite an outdated form of technology now, but it was cutting edge then. So these are all here. And Mike, he took a particular interest in a man called William Newland, who was a potter and ceramicist in the 1950s. Did I talk to you about William Newland a bit last week? Maybe it wasn't with you. William Newland and his colleagues produced a lot of architectural ceramics in the 1950s and the 1960s. And often these pieces of architectural ceramics were on the newly popular coffee bars in London. You know, coffee bars became popular as a new place to meet in the post-war period in the 1950s and the 1960s. So at that time, these new coffee machines came over from Italy, which people in Britain had never seen before. So the coffee bar became a very, very interesting and novel and also creative social space. You know, a space where artists and creative people could meet and talk. And so William Newland and his friends did a lot of murals, ceramic murals for these coffee bars, and most of these are now gone because, of course, coffee bars came into favour, they came into fashion, and the problem with things that come into fashion is they go out of fashion. And what happens when they go out of fashion, people don't value them anymore. So they were all destroyed, and most of the ceramic murals were destroyed along with them. So Mike Hughes made a particular point of recording William Newland before it was too late, and they're just wonderful. You know, I just love listening and watching the recordings that were made of William Newland and those kinds of people. Yeah.
We have some other great audiovisual materials that, as you say, you've made, and other students.
Students made, some
students
students made, yes. Natasha.
Yeah.
Natasha was an MA student, of course. I can't remember, that was the late 1990s or early 2000s. She was an MA student.
I think she started her MA the year I finished my BA.
Yeah.
And then when I was doing my MA, she just completed, and she just started teaching then, so she would have completed her PhD.
She went straight from doing her MA to doing her PhD, and then virtually straight away into teaching. And Natasha did some recordings as well when she was doing her PhD. She went to Belgium, I think, and recorded Carmen Dionyse. Yeah. So, and those recordings are here in the archive
here.
as
I mean,
well.
we're in the process at the moment of digitising them because they're on mini DVD or mini disc, mini video. I'm not sure what they are.
I think they're mini DVs.
Something from the last millennium.
Mini DVs, is that what they were called?
Right. Yeah.
Yes.
Mini K7?
Mini DVC, mini DV cassette.
Yes.
And then we've also got the great old audio cassette.
Yes.
So we're in the process of digitising these so that they will become available electronically on the electronic library. It's a project that we're working with the National Library with. They've got the equipment and they're doing that for us. So eventually all these recordings, we'll keep the format because I think as objects they're really interesting and it tells something of its time as well. But the content will be available and discoverable through NetSearch, the electronic library. So this is a kind of an update. But obviously being an archive we need to preserve the original format.
Yes.
But then just move the content along into this current day of how you can discover material now.
Yeah.
So that's what we're working on.